Welcome to the Gordon Lecture Series.
If you're lost, you can look and you will find me. Time after time, if you follow, we catch you and be waiting. Time after time, if you're lost, you can look and you will find me. Time after time, if you follow, we catch you and be waiting. Time after time. Music goes slow, I fall behind. The drum beats out of time. If you're lost, you can look and you
Hi, I'm Tevo Howard. Hello and welcome to the Gordon Lecture Series presented by Groove Magazine. We're at the Gordon Cafe Record Store in Berlin, Allerstrasse 11. Thank you for coming, everybody. Tonight I'm honored to introduce the mentor of Detroit electronic music, a Detroit music historian, the monument that stoned the original link between Detroit and Berlin techno, a master remixer as the go-to man of Detroit, a personal idol to me, to have empowered me with words during my first tour. Please welcome everyone, Mike Huckabee. You're considered a monument, Mike, that linked Detroit and Berlin techno. Is there any logical way to explain that?
Well, I wouldn't really say that. I think my involvement with Trezor and Trezor's in particular came about in the latter years, about 7, 8 years ago.
Okay.
But I actually played at the first Trezor.
Okay. Yeah, I think.
But I wasn't in the '90s when like all the guys from Detroit were coming over playing Trezor. I wasn't playing at Trezor and I wasn't releasing music on Trezor because I wasn't making techno back then.
Okay.
Because it's interesting, like, you know, as far as like making techno, it's like I keep getting thrown into that arena, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. I can handle that. I like techno. I play techno. All of the above. I worked at a record store, was a buyer, and so you know, my feedback is like, this is cool. So, and I started my own techno label, Synth, and that's when really, like, I just, you know, became like really more involved with techno, more so than I ever like even imagined.
Okay. You know, it's an odd thing. I don't think a lot of people really realize that, but the word techno for a group of electronic music hasn't really been around that long. So it's, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, it came up in the late '80s, and you know, Juan and you know Derek and we're discussing like what to call this music. So,
Derek Carter?
Derek May.
Oh, Derek May, okay. So, for me, the early technos, the name itself was, anyway, I'll go on. So when they associate you with techno, what was the original that you would call yourself as associated to as a genre?
Well, I mean, I always say like, cause I could never call myself a techno DJ. It's kind of like calling a fish, saying a fish is on the swimming team. And so like, especially coming from Detroit, I mean, that's just all around you. I mean, techno is just all around you. And I always consider myself as a house guy that can get down like that.
Okay, I see. Where was your first DJ set?
Probably in Detroit. I mean, you did backyard parties.
Okay. Do you remember the first DJ?
Yeah, I do.
Where was it?
It was in the backyard. I mean, it was in a basement. It was a basement party, and see, like, I was DJing with like a local DJ from Detroit, Gary Chandler, and we would just practice and practice. We didn't come out of the basement and accept gigs until we were ready to carry the entire night.
Okay.
I mean, we had to make sure that we could carry the entire night. Because you would play electro, you would play like rap, you would play electro, you could play like even house or something. Mm-hmm. You would play something more danceable. And we knew that we didn't want to jeopardize like not being able to handle something in front of a crowd. Therefore, we had to make sure that our mixing was up to par to carry the whole night.
I understand. But when I say this, as a Chicagoan, you know how the locals in Chicago and the locals in Detroit can be quite separate, quite a different world. One of the confusions about that is they kind of clump us together, which any Detroiter would not want to be called a Chicagoan, and any Chicagoan would not want to be called a Detroiter. So I personally don't know the techno history of Detroit. Just to say it, was it anything like Chicago where you'd see cars going by with ground effects and lowriders and stuff, pumping out the Saturday night?
Oh, absolutely.
So it was techno everywhere, as in
absolutely
the main genre of the city.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And we were fortunate to like have Electrified Mojo show, which like played and broadcasted this music. We also had like Jeff Mills and his radio show at various points in electro and some techno, and Derek May had a radio show. So, and it was various radio shows all throughout the Detroit area playing like this music.
Was there
in Detroit?
Was there a main club that you would say that you grew up going to, and that was techno, or that would be the club that you would pick of choice?
Well, yeah, I mean the Music Institute is like the defining Detroit techno club.
Nice. Okay.
Like without the premier and single club that ever really existed that pushed the music.
Okay. Then how does the African American community fit into Detroit's techno community? I know in Chicago they had, they're basically, I would say, 3 types of house, because back in the 80s they had a lot. It was coming out of the 70s, which was highly segregated from the 60s. So we had Black House, which is the black people, the house that they made and the house that they preferred. Then you had the White House, which was primarily Latino house. Like you had more like who would be an artist, like Bad Boy Bill and stuff like that. And then you had, you know, well, etc. Was there? Right. Was this the same sort of thing associated with black people that embraced techno back then, or were there types of techno?
Well, I mean, it was just the Detroit techno and the music that a certain few guys made, and just created a following. You had to be in the know, you know. But you see, like the golden moment, I always say the golden moment in Detroit techno was when nobody outside of Detroit knew about it.
Okay.
And that was the golden moment. Like when we went to like the record store and like the Model 500 record was out.
Okay.
And like nobody knew about it. It was like just purely a Detroit thing. With, like,
sure.
And that lasted only for a moment, because I mean, when it hit England, it was like mayhem. And when it hit Germany, it was the same thing. And then like it just spread to around the rest of the world, to like Asia, and just all across Europe.
So Detroit was more. I mean, it's more of a. Chicago's more of a interracial city than Detroit. Inner city Detroit is primarily Black African American.
Well, yeah, Detroit, yeah.
So okay, so and
Was.
the primary music would just be techno back then.
Well, I mean, it was like rap and electro and R&B mainstream music played.
Of course.
The techno thing was like brewing underground.
Okay.
And really parallels Chicago, what was going on in Chicago.
Okay.
Because honestly, how we found out about Chicago House was basically from a bunch of guys that went to Western Michigan University, who could stick their antenna out of the window and get a WBMX tape.
Wow. That's it. I mean,
that's the real history of like how like Chicago House
sure
made his introduction.
For sure.
My brother came back with a Farley Jackmaster Funk tape and just blew my mind.
Wow.
Like he was just hanging his antenna out of like his dorm in Western Michigan University.
Yep.
And you would have guys actually driving down to Kalamazoo.
Ann Arbor and stuff.
I think it was I think it's Grand Rapids. No, it could be.
Grand Rapids West. Yeah, the West Coast.
Yeah, but you would have driving up to Western Michigan University to get a WBMX tape. And then it got so hardcore that you just had to drive all the way to Chicago to get a full range WBMX tape.
Right.
That like you could hear like properly with no static and no feedback.
Wow.
So you just had to go the whole way. And once you went the whole way, you went to the record stores, you went to the parties.
For sure. Gramophone.
It was the same, but it was different. It was just crazy. It was a lot to feed off of.
Wow. You know that shows what, even what I said earlier, is just, it shows the separation of the two cities. Especially as inner city kids, people don't realize the isolation of the black community and how still they are. Like my best friend I have in this world never left our neighborhood. So, etc. So, me knowing a whole lot about Detroit techno back then was not not like another world. So likewise, Bob. People attribute you as a great mentor. I personally would, because just the way that you're able to kind of lay it on someone. You're doing good at this. You need to do better at that. You're doing good at this. And then personal words that you said to me that just told me, Tevo, you're doing it. You're doing all right. What would you say to an African-American Detroit youth sitting in front of you today to have them understand what it would take to have that international business way of thinking?
Well, just to believe in yourself and to know that it is something bigger and better out there for you. You know, this is really interesting because we had, I had this type of conversation ongoing all the time when I was at Youthfield. You know, the kids just didn't believe that anything was possible. And it was really hard to convince them that there was a future in making music. And a lot of them dropped off, a lot of them just became a bit depressed about the possibilities of making or earning money doing music. So it was quite a challenge, and you know, cause like the average the average kid growing up in Detroit has no chance of hearing house music.
Okay.
Period. Like the radio, they're enmeshed with what the radio plays and what their peers are listening to. So there isn't any chance for them to understand or embrace electronic music because their peers and you know the videos that come out like really seduces them by imagery.
Okay.
And
it's like pop culture and stuff.
you know, because you know you see these rap videos and 30 seconds in, the dudes in Miami and the dudes in the Swiss Alps wearing furs and minks,
For
and
sure.
then like he's in the tropical islands and then rolling up with a mansion with gates and tigers and all this, and this becomes a point where the average person, young person listening to this is just completely seduced by imagery. And the formula becomes like, if you can, how can I blow up without doing anything?
For sure. For sure. It's
Right.
up.
That's the thing, that's how the industry, you know, we got a deal for you. You don't even have to do anything.
Well, I understand, yeah. You know, they kind of collapse the gap between, you know, being successful or even having any place that can exist elsewhere in the world except for the neighborhood.
I mean, you know,
That isn't furs and, you know.
you look at, I mean, like the whole Dirty South thing started kind of like with Goody Mob. And, you know, you look at, well, what did they came out doing? They came out on the porch with their no shirt on. And, you know, they kind of almost made it accepted that, you know, you could blow up, become successful without even doing anything.
For sure. I guess it is that. They also have that, you know, some of the rap today, it doesn't have that texture of a movement, of something they want to say. So it can be just a couple words for a track, and it's just, man, you know, that stuff will rock a club, yeah, but it's all pop with nothing. So yeah, I hear you on that. What do you think how do you think that the youth that does discover Detroit techno and electronic musics and pursue it, what do you think that they run into that's different than the general public of Black American youth, Detroit youth, that they're missing? What's that element that you think would get them to catch? Because I mean, it really can't be. It can't be school. It can't be, you know, because they're not getting. A lot of African American youths aren't offered proper schooling and stuff. So it can be difficult to get that. What do you think that would be the element other than, what do you think the element they need in order to believe in the histories of the music would be?
Well, to be exposed to it,
Or to know that it's music and stuff.
to catch on through a significant family member or peer, just somebody that would have to introduce them to it and just show people that, like, a lot of artists are from Detroit are traveling.
For sure. You have Youthville. Is a place called Youthville?
Yeah.
What do you think a place like Youthville can do to get them to believe that there's something there, that they can do something there?
Well, I mean, that's what was the whole thing is, like the classes that I taught. Few kids got few possibilities. Got exposure through Resident Advisor, got exposure through Funk Magazine, which was Accelerator or something.
Okay, Accelerator, yeah.
And then actually, like this one kid got a chance to do sound design. He was 10 years old.
Okay.
I pushed that for him.
So maybe more of the pushing of the people who were successful and you feel can probably do and to latch people on. One of the things I believe in is that valley of me sitting here, you know, talking to European people, talking to people, but me sitting here with water, with a beard, happy, healthy, and how I got here, which is actually the great pioneers of house music. Because I wouldn't be here if they didn't do it. If they didn't carve that valley, I wouldn't be here. So, in an article, you said that electronic music fucks you up. Explain why.
Oh man, I mean, just try studying the instrument, and that'll tell you right there.
I understand.
I mean, all you got to do is just take lessons on any instrument. You'll be like, wait a minute, man, that's how this is put together, instead of like this, you know, confused way of like your understanding in your own head.
For sure.
Lessons will do, you know, is a great service to your electronic music career. And a lot of people think that like taking lessons is whack. And I'm like, that's just the, you know, the wrongest thing you could ever think about. So when I say that like electronic music fucks you up, I mean, you're not really seeking a defined way in which things work.
So it trips you, so to speak. It can trip you as to what you're actually creating.
Because for me, trying to make house, well, it was always like one question always led me to the next pursuit I had to engage in to make the house. Because, I mean, Larry Heard created Deep House, period. And so like I would listen to a Larry Heard track and then I was like, well, where'd this sound come from? Well, he programmed it on a synthesizer. Well, and then it was like, well, I gotta learn how to play, I gotta learn how to make my own. It was all of these questions, like all I had to do was ask one question and my hands were full doing what I needed to do.
You have to go out and buy a synthesizer, and how does it work?
Exactly. Because Larry Heard is a musician. He is not just a house guy.
For sure, he's a master composer.
He's a musician. And see, like even in New York, you went with like the disco, you know, the guys that were creating disco, they were musicians. Like even in Philadelphia, you know, where like you'd have like Vince Montana was a thorough musician. And these guys were like you know, musicians. And then that culture handed this way down to like the house producers in New York. It was like embedded in their subconscious, I would say.
I understand. Yeah, it can be confusing. The classic program they call out for that is Fruity Loops, because you can basically cut. It's like cutting and pasting.
I hate Fruity Loops.
Yeah,
that was my nemesis at UPhil, because every student just wanted to make a beat in Fruity Loops.
Right.
You would have to convince them. They would come into class, man, how did this producer chop this beat up? How did he get this effect? And you would have to answer and provide the way that was done with like Ableton Live, something like they never even heard of. And so like, that was really challenging for me to like have a kid sit down in the class and not walk out and actually be open to embrace a program he knows nothing about.
Well, one of the things, you know, that I've been noticing, or thinking about rather, is the excellence in musicianship. I even spoke with that about Just Ed when he was on his show, and excellence in musicianship. Back in the day, it was you'd hear the BMX stuff, and it was about being perfect beats, perfect cuts. And that was that perfection in it. Also in creating production, creating something that's perfect, like all the notes are perfectly even, exactly how you wanted to craft a statement as a composer, was part of the heart of the music. For me, I think a lot of that has been lost, you know.
Yeah, I mean, a lot has definitely been lost and not really handed down and discovered by the next group.
I think the way that,
because for me, like what I'm trying to really do is like, I'm trying to like make music I heard 20 years ago. That's really what I'm trying to do.
Well, yeah,
I didn't know how to make it back then. I was successful doing tracks, but I didn't understand like a lot of things Kenny Dope was doing. I didn't understand a lot of production from Masters at Work or Kerry Chandler, and it took lessons. It took some lessons to understand what these guys were doing.
for sure.
But see, I don't see anybody from today's arena producers actually going back and discovering or listening to a record or grabbing an old drum machine and reading an article and like saying, well, he used the so-and-so drum machine, let me go out and find this used or pick this up and like see what's happening with it. I don't know that I see that at all. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, for me, that was important.
It used to be, back then, that was what you did. If you weren't dope, you weren't dope. So you tried to make it work.
It was like, when I would even hear, because you didn't hear about, nobody like shared what they were using. So like when I heard things, like when I heard what like Kerry Chandler was doing, and when I heard what Kenny Dope was using the SB 1200, I would go out and get these things.
For sure. You said that you had a conversation with Terrence Dixon, who said that you got to know your self-worth. Explain why that was so important to you.
And we had this conversation where he just said, like, he reiterated that you got to know your own worth. And I can't disagree with that at all. I mean, you just really have to know what you're worth, because you could be leaving a lot of money on the table that it could be rightfully yours. I mean, you really got to know your worth in I mean, with music, with DJing, negotiating your fee, you got to know your worth. Because if you don't, because nobody's going to tell you what you're worth. Nobody is going to realistically tell you what you're worth and honor what you're worth. So you need to be as close to getting what you think you're worth as you could ever be. Just in, negotiating fees, negotiating remixes, like what did you bring to the table? And well, how would you find out your own worth? Well, put a little feedback into the things you do, like how well does the records you do sell? What is the demand coming in for you, and how do you present that or throw that back out in the market? Super important to know your. I mean, if you don't know your worth, I mean, you can't even really go a step further.
For sure. Like, I mean, that's like a guitar player that says, I'm not that good. I'm okay. Well, I'm not that. Well, I don't want to listen to you then, you know.
But we had we had a long conversation about that.
For sure.
Because I think we had a long conversation that because all this time, there's been certain people that their job is to make sure you don't know what your worth is.
Right.
And so I won't say any names, I won't mention any labels, I won't mention any, I won't say any names, but that, I mean, it's really true. And
For me, that's a sad thing, because, you know, like for me, it's, you know, if a person, I agree entirely, like if a person sells a remix and they don't think they're worth anything, they're not going to get anything for the remix. You know, they're not going to get as much as they are worth for the remix. And then their next remix, buying that synth, etc., isn't available because they didn't get any money from the last remix. But yeah, I completely agree that you know, the thing that makes me sad about that is that sometimes the companies in the distribution, the industry can crush you, whereas that mood that they push into you can be so negating.
well, I mean, I didn't see, because like the record network works differently in Europe because the distributor is trying to keep you in a box where they just want to sell 300 copies of your record and move on. And you can't really grow with like a P&D deal. You can't, I mean, you just can't, because their role is really not to blow you up or see you escape that or put a whole lot of money into you. They're just wanting to get your record to release and move on to the next guy and set up a deal with him, 300 copies, and you can't make any money like that. And see, that's why like Detroit and Chicago, if you're running a label from Detroit and Chicago, you're a bit fortunate to negotiate on your own terms. Because I mean, I'm selling 2,000 copies on every release I do. And I could never do that if like I would succumb to like these conditions that the distributor would offer me.
For sure.
And I guarantee you could be in the room, we could be in the room, and you could say like how many producers are selling 2,000 copies of every release, and not that many hands will go up.
For sure.
So see, that's how I know. See, and that tells me my worth. And see, I always say that a shrewd businessman is the only businessman.
Well, you know, I mean, you can't forget that there are businessmen as well, but the problem to me is that, you know, a lot of it's passing money. It's like, I give you a record, you give me €4 for it, and you give it to the next guy and take your €5. And what is the complaint of, you know, my personality or that I'm not great or et cetera? What is the complaint about in regarding to, you know, putting down someone's self-worth, when that next record that could come out might be a monster, you might make more money on it. So for me, it doesn't add that way. But,
well, then they'll just push you up to 500 then.
But your self-worth is another thing. You need to have your self-worth. So
Well,
that
because I back my own releases with my own capital.
Right.
I make all the music. I pay for all the mastering.
For sure.
So like,
For sure. And it guards
everything
you.
is on me.
It guards you.
And so I'm recouping all of my efforts.
I see, for
But
sure.
when you like just giving somebody the master file and he takes it from there, that's not really a good deal.
I understand. So, you said that you listen often to and read about artists that you don't like. Explain why that is so important.
That's when you go outside the box. Like, I mean, just think of like a Tribe Called Quest. If they weren't digging in bluegrass for samples or listening to Joni Mitchell, you would never like any of their music. You know, they thought outside of the box.
I understand.
And I was reading an article about from Felix the House Cat, and like he was saying how his interactions with working with Puff Daddy.
Okay.
And this is something I'm not interested in at all. And it was a really interesting article because he said that like working with Puff Daddy, he worked his ass off on like 10 tracks and he submitted it to Puff. He said Puffy didn't like none of them. He said I don't like none of them. Just it was deadlines doing the. He said he didn't like any of them. So like he had to go back in the studio and like make all types of like new tracks in like the most limiting amount of time. And like he said like he was up for days and nights in the studio. And he said right then and there, he said, I see what this business is all about if I want to make it in this round. And so he actually, you know, was successful working with Puff Daddy and get some of his music released from that angle. But like I was, you know, reading an article about Ferry Corsten. I don't even really know who that is, other than just hearing his name about. And sometimes there's something, because even a fool has some valuable information. So I'm always checking different drum and bass techniques, different trap techniques, different clump techniques, different clump kits, like sample kits.
Okay.
Because to be honest, that music is some cleverly produced garbage. I mean, man, that music is some cleverly produced garbage. I mean, those kids will come to class with like tracks that I hated. And I would actually hate like teaching clump production because you get like so many other problems compounded from the element of it itself. But they would come in with tracks and they're like, man, how did he do this? And I'm like, well, how did he do this? And like, you know, like if you listen to the average like rap song on the radio, there's a lot of production going on in it.
I understand. You relate alchemy to your music making process. Explain, please.
Yeah, alchemy. Well, that's pretty deep. You know, what the definition of alchemy is like the transferring of the base metals or properties of something and transposing it into something else. So, really, like granular synthesis would be like the element where that all becomes magical. Granular synthesis started off as this nerd type of synthesis, clicks and cuts and just really nerdy, like not so interesting to a deep house soulful producer. And I started getting into, you know, granular synthesis started like catching up to speed and offering more possibilities from the source material. So I've like taken like tones from the pyramids, I've made tones from typewriters.
Wow.
And even I got a Groove magazine kit online, which you can download for free.
Oh, wow.
Like I was typing a typewriter, I made a tone out of it, and it got released on Ben Clark's label.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
So that's alchemy, transferring the typewriter into a tone, transferring that into a track.
I see.
That was really, I mean, that's just all being transferred.
Yeah, that's really good. To me, that's very futuristic. That's, you know.
Granular synthesis is what's up.
For sure. For sure. That's really, you know, understanding what sound is and what speaking through it is. So yeah, that's really futuristic. All right, so you got to tell us. I got two more questions. You got to tell us what's next. What's next with the remixes? What's next in the biz? What should we be looking for next?
And I mean, well, honestly, publishing. I mean, that's
Publishing.
yeah. I just took a course in publishing, and it really just alerted me to how screwed I was getting.
Okay, I understand.
I mean, like, as soon as your beats leave the computer, you need a publishing company. I mean, like, don't put and if you're putting a record out and you don't have a publishing company, I mean, people are making money off of your tracks without you earning anything.
Okay, yeah.
So let's say a radio show in Serbia wanted to play your track. If you're not set up to receive that money, you're not going to get it. And it sits in a black hole, a black pot.
I understand.
For X amount of years, you don't claim it. It goes to the elite members of that society. So like Elton John gets your money, or somebody like that.
Wow. Wow. So a lot of the undercurrent of the music business is something out there.
Publishing, knowing how to read a contract. That's the next thing. I'm knowing how to read a contract, knowing what the terminology in the contract, because you really shouldn't be signing a contract if you don't understand like things going on or mentioned in the contract.
Of course.
I mean, I think a lot of artists always do that, but then you find out like 3 or 4 years down the road, and that's alchemy too, because that's going from your possession to the label's possession. That's alchemy from your possession to mine. That's the label, that's the record label. That's alchemy in itself.
It's definitely understanding property and what property,
Remixes,
the value of property.
doing a few select remixes, but really I'm just like working on like my drums. I'm a snare freak.
Okay.
Just, sampling snares and hi-hats and unconventional, like things that can represent high-end or a snare in the track.
Okay.
Really interested in like making drums.
Awesome. So yeah, all right. I got the last question that everyone gets asked this question. Do you think a DJ should play for themselves or for the crowd?
Oh wow, a bit of both. A bit of both. Where I would say you will play for yourself. Self would be kind of determining your overall personality as a DJ and how you want to be perceived by the public or the crowd. And then just recognizing or acknowledging the fact that you're DJing in a public setting where it should be, you should pay attention. There's certain things you should be paying attention for, the dance floor.
For sure.
And how to like keep people on the floor.
For sure.
I mean, because if you're gonna be making, but see, that's really controversial. But I just think that like if you're gonna be making statements all the whole time through your set, then what is the set about? I mean, are you employed to like entertain people?
For sure.
Are you employed to make people dance? Or are you just here to make a statement? See, that's really controversial.
For sure.
Because for me, like I don't play like the dance floor being empty.
Okay.
I don't compromise myself in order to keep the dance floor. But I play music that I feel is interesting to me first and foremost.
I understand.
I think that like you can play, and you should take risks in playing tracks that like this guy way in the back of the room will only understand.
For sure.
And then like bring him closer to the front in the club.
For sure. I understand. Awesome. Well, you know what I'm looking forward to? I'm looking forward to playing alongside you one day. I think we have. No, we never played in the same room. Okay, Mike. It's been a pleasure. I'm going to hand you over to the crowd.
Had a feeling that I belonged. I had a feeling I miss someone. Good, I felt this car, but we go cruising, entertain ourselves. Still ain't got a job. Now work in the market as a checkout girl. I know things will get better. Go find work and I'll get promoted, or we'll move out of the shelter, buy a big house and live in the suburbs. I remember we were driving in your car. Streets of back, I feel like I was drunk. City lights hanging out before us, and all the lights under out my shoulder. And I had a feeling that I belonged. I had a feeling I miss someone.
I got a quick question. You kind of touched on the classes you were teaching. Can you just explain what that was like and what was the program? And then just a follow up, if there's anything that the students that you were kind of talking to, if they taught you anything that you kind of incorporated.
Yeah, I was teaching at UPhil for about 8 years. It's a program for 11 kids, 11 and 19. It only costs $25 a year. State-of-the-art equipment. Got a lot of sponsorship from Native Instruments, a lot of sponsorship from Ableton, Moog. And just offered kids like a chance to explore the music, but just a lot of their questions and their orientation and how like you had to like decipher and break that down for them and to make them understand what an oscillator is. It was a lot of patience. And so it just taught me how to teach that kid, that level, that age level.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Danny. I just have a question. You mentioned before that you like to do a little stuff with the ground embarrassing tests, and just what is your preparation in the studio? Do you like more to work like hardware, external synthesizers and machines, or you like more computer?
Both. It's just a combination of both. I rely on hardware for certain things, and I take advantage of certain things in the digital realm. I'm always buying like hardware synthesizers, and I'm always buying like gear. I just bought like this Matrix Brute by Arturia. Just bought the Sledge 2.0 synthesizer by Studio Logic. So I'm always checking things. I'm always replacing things. I'm always checking things. There's some advantages and disadvantages of both. Well, the advantages of software is that you don't have to actually be home or be in that physical location to get music done. Now hardware just is what it is. I mean, it's the actual possession and ownership of an instrument you're touching, and if it's a keyboard that you're actually spending time like playing and actually building up your physical execution of with your hands, if you're like a player, if you're developing into being a musician. So I would say like the whole debate with like software versus hardware would be over now because a lot of software synths sound just as good as hardware synths. But notice that like 15 years ago, nobody ever told you that really a software synth didn't sound as good as like a hardware synth. They just were always interested in selling you something mimicked or emulated in software. And you know, that had to, the zeros and ones translation of like the sound had to come a long way before it actually could be you know, evaluated up against a hardware set.
Hi. I was wondering about if, with all the years of experience you have as a producer and DJ, do you still get nervous in front of gigs, or do you have moments of self-doubt? And if so, how do you deal with those emotions?
Not really, but you just you dig deeper into yourself and you find a way to connect. I mean, sometimes, you know, it can be just a lot of hype around playing at a particular club. I won't say the name of this club.
I saw you last time there, very nice it was actually.
I won't say the name, but sometimes there's just a lot of hype around playing, and it all comes down to like how like you can pick somebody out of the crowd and build a story around. Mm-hmm. Like maybe you, again, like you see this person way in the back, or you like something about them, or you identify something about them, and you try to bring that person much more in the foreground as opposed to in the background. It's just basically finding a way to connect with somebody or a situation, and that really kills like any of nervousness or something like
It's
that.
really about identifying that particular person that you feel you have a connection with or that you value. Like,
I mean, because I always say that any party you're playing at, like 1 to 3 people in there will identify themselves as the person you need to pay attention to and play for, because they're setting off the mood for everybody else. And these are the people that are usually dancing first. They're the people that are not so restrictive or shy, and they're maybe wearing something that's more interesting, I suppose, that like you can just really take advantage of their energy. That's the secret to DJing. That's the secret to DJing.
What are like the telltale signs that they're like really connected to
Well,
the
I
music?
mean, like the hair,
Okay.
the way that they dress, their T-shirt, the way that they're interacting, the way that they're like interacting with other people, if they're shy or not, if they're like really in front, and if they really like stood out first to like dance, and then everybody usually, that person makes it comfortable for other people.
All right.
And it's really important to find those type of people while you're DJing. You could be wrong. I mean, you could pick somebody that's actually not that. But then you probably need to like shift your attention to somebody that is actually that.
Okay.
You first talked about the PND contract, present distribution contract, and you described him as a boxer for someone who starts his own label. What do you would suggest to someone who will start his own label and have not enough money to put in, because it's not easy, you know, it's not with a couple thousand you can reach the goal, you know, you have to invest something. And I mean, for me, for my experience, PND was kind of small goal at the beginning to have the money enough to press the records, you know. And what do you suggest nowadays to do it and to came out from that box?
I mean, I hate to say it, but man, P&D means rape. It just means rape. I mean, like especially like if you're like a up and coming artist, you don't really have enough visibility, you don't have enough name, but you do have an interesting track that you want to press. It's the quickest way to really get taken advantage of. And a lot of people don't want to hear this, but you know, I'm like this European market just seems to put people in a box that they can't escape or grow from. Because you can't do anything with 300 copies of records. You won't make any money. You want to be a label. You need to have ideas that you're pressing on vinyl that can at least sell 1,000 copies. I mean, and nobody is really even looking at this. I don't see many people even trying to consider like what will be the formula to make that happen. I mean, because there are underground labels, unknown people that come out with tracks that like, whoa, blow people away. And they like quickly escape this box that they would have been placed in. But I would say like, don't start if you want to press your own music and you want to put your own releases out, make sure you have enough capital behind that project first and foremost, because if you don't have enough, you're going to be stuck in the middle of the process of putting the record out. Maybe like you got as far as to like get the record mastered, but now you have no more money to press the record, and now like you're stuck and things aren't going as fast as. So you really want to be equipped to make this happen all the way through the entire process of getting a record right here.
Okay, let's just take, I think, 2-3 more questions, and then we can keep it casual after this, that, you know, we can have like a little mingle thing. So 2-3 more questions and then cool.
Well, but when you say that vinyl's only bonus these days because most money is made digital, and especially I think it's pretty unrealistic, especially for young when you a record, because most of the time 300 copies are like really hard to sell with the amount of music that's coming out every day, every week.
I would disagree. I could actually prove why. You take a digital release, you be like jumping up and down for joy if you had 300 legal downloads. I mean, once the track gets up, I mean, how many digital downloads is like a record selling these days? I mean, what is a good number of a digital release? Whereas vinyl, like, it's making a comeback. It's still preferred by a lot of DJs in Berlin. You know, it's really hard to get like 300 legal digital downloads. You know, it does and doesn't work for certain people for certain reasons. It's really a tricky thing. It's way more expensive to be releasing music on vinyl than it is digital. But that's what I think you'll cut through, and it's the same problems on digital you're describing on the digital format as on vinyl, because digital format has tons of releases out that your release is up against, and even vinyl has tons of releases that your label will be good. So it all is coming down to quality. It's all coming down to quality. I mean, do you study what works in a club? Do you know, and like even like I'm doing workshops now, my whole thing is like, do you understand the language of house music? Or even whatever you're in, let's say you're in the minimal techno, like do you understand the language of Perline records? Do you understand how would you describe like what's actually going on in the Perline track? Like how would you describe what's going on? How would you describe like what is the common denominator element in a house track, like based on the rhythms and the chord progressions, certain drum patterns, certain drum machines that like you can pick up and hear. Like, how do you describe that language of the music you're into? Really helps a lot. Don't know if I've really answered your question. That's just my feedback on it.
Obviously, there's a lot of seminal figures who've come out of Detroit for house and techno, and then you have someone like Dilla, who's, you know, not very arguably one of the greatest beat makers of all time. What do you think the connection, or is there a connection or something about Detroit that has kind of created people who've made such an impact on those genres?
It was just our environment. I mean, because there's nothing to do in Detroit. There's absolutely nothing. Here in Berlin, there's just too much stuff to do. There's always something to do in Berlin. I mean, go to a cafe, go to a park, go to a club, go to a workshop. I mean, go to a restaurant, ride your bike around Berlin, come out of a club at 10 o'clock in the morning, go to a club at 10 o'clock in the morning. I mean, there's too much stuff. It's too much. When I'm here, it's just too much stuff to do. And see, in Detroit, there's nothing to do. That's all you do is work on music. That's all you do. Work on music and go to the airport, catch a flight, and come back and you do the same thing. Pay the bills you have, like, come back, studio. And it's that type of pressure up against knowing that if you don't do that, you'll have like a really uninteresting job if you don't pursue it, because the music was always our way out. And so like we actually like took that and ran with it. And so like Jay Dilla is just really like another example of somebody that like pioneered hip hop and took it forward and created a following and made it happen. But back to your question, because I wouldn't be anything if I released digital. Half of my vinyl sales would be gone. All I got to do is release something digital, and I'm not selling as many records as I am right now. I used to work in a record store, and the record store demise happened because of digital sales. The shop had to close because the industry was turning digital, and there was not enough to make the shop profitable anymore. And so the shop had to close. So for me, it's a bit personal because I lost my job because of the advent of this format, and I just never clicked with it. Because one person, he said once a vinyl guy, always a vinyl guy. And that's kind of true for me, but I don't, you know, not like anybody because they play digital music or if they release digital music. But for me, it's just that, like, you know, vinyl, what I've always been doing is still working.
One last question?
Yeah, I had a few questions, like, but I chose no one. There's the Trésor Club is now open up in Detroit, another Trésor or not?
Well, there's a lot of talk and negotiations about that happening. They have identified a building that they are trying to secure. They've been having a lot of discussions and talks with Detroit officials regarding this, and we kind of welcome it, although it is something that no Detroiter could ever do themselves. You would get this idea shot down from day one, but they're listening to an outsider who's willing to invest their own resources to try to make this happen. And there is discussion about a Trésor Club
Just a discussion.
in Detroit. I don't know where they're at with it, but I do know that the conversation is ongoing. It is something being discussed. And even was discussed like the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago at the Movement Festival.
Just be fair, because you also raised your hand at the same time.
I wanted to ask how important you think it is to have self-critique for yourself or for other people who make music or who want to DJ. Because the way you self-critique yourself makes a big difference, I guess, in how far you can get. If you are really critical on how you DJ, for example, then I think you would get further, but how do you think about it, or how is it for yourself, self-critiquing?
Well, I mean, I'm always trying to I'm always realizing that I'm in a competitive situation. I'm always acknowledging competition. I'm always trying to beat competition. I'm always figuring out how I can make a better record. And a lot of things I do, I try to increase or put pressure on myself. Like now, I'm really listening. I'm really listening to like what's going on in like a lot of the house records that I like. Because sometimes I have like the motivation to make a record that I always like, but make that record different. So I'm listening to like different drum machines being used. I'm listening to different chord progressions being played. I'm always studying, I'm always listening to the way a record is mastered. That's one thing that Europe has over the States is the mastering. Mastering is incredible in Europe. I always get my tracks mastered in Europe. I never am relying on like American mastering engineers, because I was actually talking to Ron Murphy, who was a mastering facility. He ran the mastering facility in Detroit, and that's where everybody got them records mastered from. And he broke down the difference between American mastering and European mastering. And he said that the machines they cut the records on in Europe can cut at higher frames than America. So that's why they're able to get more, maybe high end or certain frequencies can get cut. He broke that down to me. And for me, I just really, German mastering at that is really good. German master, I can't. I'll give it to him, German mastering.
Cool. All right, guys. I think we just release Mike from the electric chair. It's very hot. The light is really burning. We just need to switch it off. But he's still sticking around and for some time, for a few minutes, and you guys can just casually interact with him as you wish. And if you still missed something. Okay, have a beer, enjoy.
Welcome to Tevo Howard Recordings.
Baby.